and economic relief to working Americans during the coronavirus outbreak. We are just appalled that the administration really has had no plan. Here we are. It's close to 2 months since we first knew about coronavirus. They have all kinds of problems, obviously, with testing, but they also have not come up with a plan to help people who need help. We believe the help should be aimed at people, not at corporations. We believe the help should be targeted at the people who have suffered from this coronavirus problem, directly or indirectly. We don't think they should just throw money out of an airplane and hope some of it lands on the people who are affected. And so we have targeted our relief. We make it's aimed at people, not at big corporations, not at some kind of general long-term economic plan that the president might want for other purposes. It seems the president seems to be more worried about the health of the big banks than the health of Americans. It seems that the president is more eager to help the oil companies than help the person who lost his job because of corona. We don't believe that works. And so the administration is proposing tax cuts and bailouts for the airline industry, the oil and gas industry. That's just out of touch. The bottom line, we need to put people first. And so what we are proposing today is in two parts. One goes to the immediate needs of people who are suffering from this illness, directly or indirectly. The second goes to the kind of economic relief which could be dealt with a little further down the road that can help get our economy going, but it is targeted, and targeted at the people who are hurt and the places and people that need help. And that's our message to the administration. Focus. Focus on the problem, and then focus on the people who need help, not on your big cronies and political friends and other kinds of things that you want to try to do. So, on the first part of it, the immediate help, paid sick leave, we think there's a growing consensus that there should be paid sick leave. Unemployment insurance. If you've lost your job, it should be much easier and quicker to get unemployment insurance. How are you going to feed your family? Increased SNAP benefits. What about families who need to eat? And school meals. Many of the kids whose parents who will have to stay home, their best meals are the breakfasts and lunches they get in the schools. And so those are immediate relief to the people who need help, so that they can either take care of their families and make sure that they get the help they need. Another part of that, of course, which relates directly to health needs, is we think all the testing should be made free of charge, so nobody wanders around spreading the illness because they can't afford it. But then there are other kinds of longer-term economic relief that is far better than a payroll tax cut or relief to big industries that we are focused on. And they would be improving community development block grant disaster relief, small business disaster grants, Federal Transit Administration support for public transportation agencies, emergency mortgage relief, which might include some forbearance and rental assistance, more federal housing support, and emergency grant aid to help schools and child care facilities stay clean and safe. We're telling President Trump, and we're saying to the country, the best way to deal with the economic problems is focus on the people who have suffered from this virus, not some scattershot approach that the ideologues in the White House may want. And I do believe that the House will pass some of these more immediate provisions that Nancy and I talked about on Sunday this week. But many of these other things on the economic side, we will try to figure out the best way to get those done to get the economy moving again. Those needs are very, very important and immediate, but not quite as immediate as some of these health needs. So each of my colleagues will talk about different parts of this proposal and their views, and we're going to hear from Senators Murray, Brown, Durbin, Leahy, Wyden, Warner, Cardin. Senator Murray.
Well, thank you, Senator Schumer. Families in my home state of Washington are scared, they are frustrated, and they are angry, and so am I. New reporting now makes clear that even after researchers in Seattle raised serious concerns about the possibility of community spread in Washington state and tried to work with federal agencies to conduct testing, the administration did not work with them to let the public know how serious this was. You can be sure that I'm going to get to the bottom of this and make sure it never happens again. I am furious that instead of acting with urgency, they did nothing. Instead of acting with transparency, they kept quiet. Instead of working to keep families safe, they wasted valuable time. And now, over 24 people in my home state have died. Over 1,000 across the country are now confirmed to be infected, and experts are telling us that many more will likely to become ill. I'm hearing from people in Washington state who are worried about their older relatives who are now dying alone. They're worried about having to miss work. They're worried about being unable to pay rent. They're worried about how to keep their children safe at school and how to care for them and make sure they get a nutritious meal if their school is canceled. I'm hearing from small business owners. They're worried no one is coming through their door, and they're unsure how to support their workers going forward. I'm hearing from communities who are worried about how they protect people who are experiencing homelessness. I have seen a lot in my years as a U.S. Senator, but I am not exaggerating when I say that this is one of the most trying times I've seen my state experience. So I'm absolutely going to be holding this administration accountable for missing so many opportunities to get ahead of this, but I'm also going to be doing everything in my power to make sure we do not miss significant opportunities we still have to slow this down and manage it as best as we can. And that means doing everything we can to focus on the workers and families on the front lines of this crisis and how to slow the spread of this virus in areas where there are already outbreaks so we can buy time needed to prepare in areas where the situation isn't so dire. Right now, experts are telling people, stay home if you're sick. But for too many people, staying home from work means losing a paycheck or losing their job, and that has to change, and it has to change fast. That's why I've introduced legislation that would require employers to provide employees 14 days of paid sick leave available immediately in the event of a public health emergency like this outbreak. I am disappointed that Republicans just blocked this legislation on the floor, but I am not going to stop pushing to them to join us to get this to the president's desk. We're also working with them on other steps. To start, we've got to make sure that everyone can get quality, affordable health care so that cost is not a barrier to anyone seeking medical advice or for any healthcare professional who needs to seek treatment or testing. We need to make sure our schools have plans for everyone that will be impacted by the difficult decisions they may have to make, and many are now making in my state. And we have to make sure that those plans address food insecurity and make sure students who rely on their school for their only nutritious meal are not overlooked. We also have to make sure we are supporting communities in addressing the needs of people experiencing homelessness. And we have to reckon with the economic impact this crisis will have in our communities, which is why Democrats are putting forward this economic package to start addressing this crisis that focuses on small businesses and workers, and we need to make sure that no one loses a paycheck as a result of this crisis, that no one struggles to make rent or keep the heat on or afford groceries. And we need to make sure that none of our children miss out on a nutritious meal, that no small business has to shutter its doors waiting for this crisis to end, and no community struggles to care for the homeless. This is a frightening time. There are a lot of unknowns, but we do know the steps we are outlining would help to save lives, slow the spread of this virus, and reduce its impact on our communities. So we as Democrats are going to keep pushing for action now to support our families and our communities and slow the spread of this virus. And we will continue working to address new challenges in the months ahead. And we will not forget to look back and find out why this crisis was not addressed thoughtfully, smartly, and with plans, and what we needed when it began.
Thank you, Senator Murray. Senator Brown.
The president had chance after chance to get ahead of this, and he failed. I'm angry on behalf of millions of Ohioans and Americans who are scared right now. One of the most important things we can do is to stop the spread is pass paid sick leave today. We need to get help to the people who need it now. Parents whose kids' schools are closed, people who aren't getting paid, have trouble making rent, have trouble making their mortgage payment. No one should be evicted or foreclosed upon during this crisis. Paid sick days are one of the most important ways we can do that. Think about the restaurant workers, the people who prepare our food. Think about what you do if your child's school closes down for a week. For so many people, taking a sick day means going without pay and even in some cases potentially losing your job. It hurts everyone, even if you're lucky enough to have paid time off. Everybody's at risk when more people are out and about when they're sick. Our office, as the offices of all of us, our office has been getting calls from dozens of people saying, what can I do? What if I come down with something? What if I have to choose between my $12 an hour job with no real benefits, going to work sick, or losing that $100 for the day? How am I going to pay my $700 a month rent? It's unacceptable that millions of people are faced with those impossible choices. Promises aren't enough. We need to pass this paid sick leave legislation, sick days legislation now. People need to be able to stay in their homes during this crisis. Our plan gets help directly to people struggling to pay rent, to pay mortgages, so they're not foreclosed on in these difficult, awful times. It's a dignity of work issue. It's a public safety issue.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senators Durbin and Stabenow were part of this but couldn't be here for other obligations. And now we have Senator Leahy.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. We do have a serious crisis, and I'm afraid that the White House believes in using rhetoric and not facing reality. What we're doing is trying to substitute reality for their rhetoric. The American people are looking for leadership. I believe it's up to us to provide that leadership. And what we're doing is looking at people. Those are the ones, not the corporations, it's the people we respond to and hear from in our states. As has been said, paid sick days so people can stay home to protect their health and the health of others. That's critical. It's critical they be able to stay home, but it's critical that they're not fearing that they're going to lose their apartment or their house or their ability of their children to go to school. Small businesses and communities, we're trying to help them in Vermont, and I applaud our governor who's doing that. Safety net, those who can't pay their rent or afford their mortgages. But also the American people ought to know they're getting more than rhetoric. They're facing reality. It does not help at all when the president comes in wearing a campaign hat at a meeting of the CDC, says that he understands it's probably better than the doctors do, and besides, he wrote a perfect letter to Ukraine. Come on. That just frightens people. That's why I talk about the rhetoric. Democrats and Republicans came together, and I'll give you an example that we can do it. The White House proposed a fig leaf appropriations of a couple $2 billion, taking a lot of it out of Ebola and out of low-income heating. Republicans and Democrats came together, and we put together that $8.3 billion supplemental. In both the House and the Senate, I think there was only 2 or 3 votes against it by Republicans for whatever reason. but virtually every Republican and every Democrat voted for it. And the president said, oh, great idea. I want to thank the Republicans who sent me this. Well, we didn't do it as a partisan thing. We worked together because we wanted to make sure our health agencies had the money to address it. I hope we can do this on the same bipartisan, bicameral way we did for the emergency supplemental. I mentioned that because that gave an example. The White House should have applauded that, should have got on board and said, we'll work with you. Because the virus doesn't say, are you a Republican or a Democrat? Are you from a red or a blue state? The virus is affecting the United States of America, is affecting all Americans. And we ought to be standing up, put the rhetoric aside, face reality, stand up for America. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator
I
Wyden.
think-
Senator Wyden.
Thank you, Leader Schumer. And let me just talk briefly about some of the matters we're working on at the Senate Finance Committee. And I'm going to start briefly by saying what would be a huge mistake to do, and then talk about what we're trying to do that would actually make sense. Yesterday, Larry Kudlow, speaking for the administration, proposed a massive reduction in Social Security payroll taxes for big corporations. It would amount to hundreds of billions of dollars in tax cuts for big corporations. So what you're talking about is in the middle of this huge health challenge, what I think many Americans see as a pandemic. What they want to do is hit Social Security like a wrecking ball with a massive tax cut for the country's biggest corporations, and we are going to oppose this with everything we have. I'll just tell you, with respect to the Senate Finance Committee and our Democrats, this will not happen. Period. Full stop. Now, with
What you really mean.
yeah. Now let's talk a little bit about what we want to do, because as we have consistently said, we are going into this with this kind of laser-like approach to get help quickly to folks who are hurting, folks who are walking that economic tightrope I described, trying to balance the rent bill against the food bill and the fuel bill against some other critical costs like out-of-pocket medical that Senator Murray and I see in our committees. So the other part that we are working on in the Finance Committee is trying to make sure that we improve the unemployment system so that workers who lose their paycheck because of the coronavirus can have access more quickly to unemployment benefits to help them make ends meet until they're back at work. So what I have been working on with my colleagues, and I've got several here from the Finance Committee, we've worked with the leadership, is something along the lines of a temporary, fast-track coronavirus unemployment assistance program. We're trying to pick up on some of the principles of disaster unemployment insurance. I would note that the finance staff tried to look into the history. This would be, based on everything we've picked up, the first time unemployment insurance has been expanded in response to a public health crisis. And it's, in my view, one of the most essential things we can do to help working families. We have the unemployment numbers across the country, but weekly families that are hurting get a few hundred dollars. We can do better by them. We would include folks who are out of work because of their own illness, a quarantine, or a school closure that leaves them without child care. We would include those whose hours have been slashed. So if you're down to one shift a week from 5, you could still make rent. And as Senator Schumer touched on and my colleagues, you got a choice here. Do you want to subscribe to some kind of version of trickle-down? Late last night, I learned that the administration wanted to include a proposal that they have been lobbying for the big corporations for years, and at the last minute they wanted to put this into a package. That's not what this effort is about. It's about helping people, people who are hurting, and helping them quickly, not about trying to find another sort of Trojan horse for tucking more goodies in for big companies. And now, another talented member, you're going to just see the entire Finance Committee here showing their ideas, Senator Warner and then Senator Cardin.
Thank you, Ron. Let me join my colleagues and echo what they've already said. We've seen a White House and a president that at first tried to deny that there were going to be economic consequences of this illness. And then when they reluctantly acknowledged that our economy was being hit, what did they come up with? Traditional macroeconomic tools. Let's do a monetary policy rate cut. Let's talk about a general stimulus to all families. Let's do a payroll tax cut. These are not the tools that we need to use at this moment in this challenge. We don't know how long this economic challenge will extend, but what we need to do, and why I'm proud to support these efforts, is we need targeted assistance to those workers and families who are being directly affected by the coronavirus. That's why today I'm leading a letter with 33 of my Democratic colleagues to the President, urging him, yes, to take economic action, but to have that economic action targeted to the two universes that we know are affected. No one should lose their job, their pay, or not have the freedom to take care of their children if they're home from school, if they have to self-quarantine or if they get sick. The whole universe of individuals, we see this particularly in Washington State. We're going to see this, unfortunately, I believe, across the country in the coming weeks, where people are going to follow the directions of the healthcare officials and have to self-quarantine. They should not pay an economic price. And then there's another whole set of industries, from airline to hotel to restaurant to a whole series of service industries, who, and Ben Cardin will speak to this in a moment, many times small businesses that just aren't going to have customers. We've got to make sure that we get economic assistance to those workers as well. What you have here is the first round of specific items, from UI to paid sick leave to direct support for small businesses, CDBG grants, and I would echo again something that Senator Brown and I've been working on. If we're going to give the kind of relief on that mortgage or rent payment, we are going to need forbearance from the regulators for those institutions that actually provide that relief. This is a great first step. Senator Cardin's going to close us out with small businesses. We may need to do more, but let's make sure that in this initial activity, for those workers and families who are directly affected, they get this assistance right away.
Let me first thank Senator Schumer for establishing the right priorities for us dealing with the coronavirus. Our first priority is to deal with the medical challenges, and that's clearly where we have placed our priority. But when we deal with the economic impact of the coronavirus, let me talk a moment about small businesses and what's happening with small businesses. In my state of Maryland, the announcements have been made about our colleges are going to close for a longer period of time. I look at the small businesses on Route 1 through College Park, Maryland, and know that many of these businesses depend upon the college family being there in order to stay open. I look at Charles Village in Baltimore City, where Johns Hopkins is located. They're closing their dorms in regards to the next several weeks. That's going to affect the viability of those small businesses. I think about what's happening in the tourism industry in my state and around the nation, about conventions that are being canceled. All that's going to affect a lot of small businesses that depend upon that business and cannot survive without having that type of economic activity. I was pleased to see that we were able to get into the first supplemental appropriation, emergency supplemental appropriation bill, the qualifications that small businesses will qualify for disaster relief direct loans by the Small Business Administration. That's good news, and we provided some resources for the SBA to handle that. Well, here's the challenge. Small businesses do not have the information on what qualifies for that disaster relief. We've got to get that information out there. So one of our proposals will be to provide the resources to the resource partners, so the women business centers, the SBDC, small business development centers, so that they can get information out to how you can qualify for these disaster relief direct loans. We also want to help in regards to the capital that these businesses need, the cash flow that they need in order to stay in business. We're going to have to change the rules in regards to the major programs under SBA on their loan program, the 7A program, the 504, the Community Advantage programs, make them more accessible and less costly, waiving the fees so that businesses can get these loans that can qualify. And then lastly, if your bottom line has been dramatically changed, you're not going to qualify for a loan because you don't have the resources to repay those loans. So we want to have direct grants to small businesses, and we are defining these as small businesses. We're not talking about the big companies. We're talking about those mom and pop type businesses that won't be there tomorrow, where we have innovation and job creation and job growth. We want them to be able to qualify for direct grants from the SBA so they can remain in business, continue to provide the innovation and job growth and economic activity to our nation. That's the type of programs that we're going to be recommending, and I look forward to working with all my colleagues to see that we can take these issues up as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Ben. Just one more point, and then we'll take questions. Many of these ideas, we consulted the state and local officials who are going through this problem and what they needed. And lots of what we proposed comes exactly from them. So this is not just something we've thought we've thought up on our own. We've talked to them, and that makes a big difference. And again, if I had to pick one word that picks what we want to do, it's targeted. Targeted. We're focusing on the people who have been hurt and the people who need help. Immediate help, healthcare help, and help to the economy. Yes.
The House is expected to vote on their bill tomorrow. Is the Senate prepared to stay in next week to pass something before they leave?
Well, you'll have to ask Leader McConnell. He's in charge of that.
Is that something you support, though?
Well, we might be able to pass some of their things tomorrow.
Piggybacking off that, Leader Senator, talk to us a little bit about the American people. How are you going to get this passed in a reasonable time?
Well, we want to get it passed quickly. Look, some of the economic programs are going to take a little longer. You know, some of the things like putting together a new small business program, a mortgage forbearance program. What do we do exactly with targeting the CDBG? But some of them are needed immediately. The paid leave, the unemployment insurance, the food for the kids. And so it'll probably be divided into two parts. One, immediate direct relief to people who are suffering, and second, some economic help to people who are suffering that helps the economy in the longer run. Next.
Mr. Leader, which of these proposals are you intending to be temporary, and then if so, for how long, and which permanent? Is the SIP idea intended to be a permanent change? I mean, what do you all make of the Republicans' talk of considering a highway bill at this time, including perhaps Senator Cardin's bill?
Look, as I said, it should be targeted to the people who need help. And that's what we're focused on, these types of proposals.
Are they permanent or temporary?
Some of them are permanent and some of them are temporary.
So as you know, we've been trying to pass paid sick leave for a very long time, and it is a program where you earn your leave as you work, so up to 7 days. This legislation has that, but we have included what we're calling an emergency provision. So when there is an emergency public health declaration, that then qualifies you to get 2 weeks of paid sick leave. So for all the people in my home state, and there are many who are being told to stay home because they're sick so they will not spread it, for the people who are having to stay home because their school is closed, for the people who are having to stay home because they are in self-quarantine because they've been exposed to it, this will mean that they will stay home and not spread it.
And by the way, there's a sheet we've given out which gives you some of the details on each of the things that we have mentioned. Yes? Did you want to?
No, just it's
Go ahead.
temporary on unemployment as well, and it's targeted to making sure that you have this help while we're dealing with this epidemic.
Senator Schumer, has anyone from the administration reached out to you about a bipartisan proposal that might actually
Well,
pass?
as you know,
Or just
Secretary Mnuchin talked to Speaker Pelosi yesterday, and we'll see where that comes. But basically, the administration hasn't had much of a plan at all. So we're not sure what they think on what day. the Speaker, the Democrats in the House, the Democrats in the Senate are taking the lead here because the nation demands it, and there's such a vacuum from the administration. Yes.
In light of Chairman Wyden's or Senator Wyden's comments, would anything with the payroll tax cut include?
Well, you heard our comments on that, Kane.
But you had referenced, I think you said corporate cronies in terms of assistance to corporations. Are you opposed to any type of assistance that would go toward the corporate side?
We're looking, I mean, we'd be skeptical when the administration proposes it. This idea of helping shale oil, which the Washington Post wrote about yesterday, is absurd. What we want to see is, even if it goes to corporations, that it goes to the workers. So if an airline is hurting and airline workers are laid off, we would want the help to go down to those workers. So that's our focus. It wouldn't be that we wouldn't say that help to corporations is totally off the table, but it's got to go down immediately and help the workers. Okay?
Can I just add to that?
Yeah.
The most important goal we should have here is to stop the spread of this virus. So anything we do in this package now, in the immediate, is to make sure that people don't spread this virus. That's what we're focused on doing.
And the bottom, to just follow up on Patty, if someone's laid off from an airline and they might have been exposed, or one of their family is exposed, they need some help so they don't, so they can live and sustain. Some of it is economic, but again, targeted at the people, individuals who are most hurt. Cheryl. Well, we're figuring out the price, but let me tell you, it will cost a lot less than the cost of doing nothing and letting this virus spread. Much less.
One cost. Over half our workers work for small companies, and the cost of our proposals are a fraction of what the administration is recommending right now. That will help small businesses.
Yes.
For Senator Wyden, the payroll tax cut was a major part of the stimulus in 2009. Democrats supported that. Why is that a bad idea now?
Well, let me just outline some of the people who don't benefit from it. If you have lost shifts, for example, if you get tips, you don't benefit. If, say, you don't have much in terms of sick leave.
If you're out of work, you don't.
And you're out of work. So what we're doing, and that's the whole point of the unemployment compensation effort that we're focused on in the Finance Committee, is getting help to people now, rather than Larry Kudlow's proposal that wants to cut, taxes for gigantic corporations.
Thank you, everybody.
Something that coronavirus elevates the importance of getting done, it does, but it's not an immediate response. I think our focus has to be on dealing with the medical issues and those that are directly impacting the workers and small businesses. So that's my top priority. But we can move a transportation bill, we should do it.
So make sure I understand you correctly, do it just now, as now, it's not top level, do it.
Yeah, and the issue there is how do you give, we want a 5-6 year reauthorization bill, we want it properly financed. That's going to take a little bit of time, I think, frankly. You can't just use a magic wand for everything. You have to figure out how we're paying for some of these issues. So, and the immediate impact on our economy, there would be some confidence in start getting some of these contracts. But it's not the same impact as the target bill that deals with workers or small businesses. Depends what the market, I can tell you the small business providers, I have a fairly